Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives. Apologies if this is a day late, but today we're going to be discussing episodes 113 and 114 of Steven Universe, Adventures in Light Distortion, and Gem Heist, and, previously on Steven Universe, I suppose. So, in the last episode, Steven's Dreams, Steven was, as the title of the episode implies, having strange dreams. Specifically, he was dreaming of a flower field in the mountains, and in said field, he was seeing what looked like a small, I want to say, palace, but I don't want to. It was like one of those it was like a gazebo with a veil on it, but it also seemed to have legs, and it was clearly in disrepair as it was, broken down, flowers had been growing on it, so it was clear it was there for a while. And every time Stephen woke up from these dreams, he was crying, though even he admits that he doesn't understand why, as the dreams themselves weren't sad. However, he did recognize the structure in his dreams, and with the help of Connie, he was able to identify it as a gem structure known as a palanquin. And when he tried asking the gems about it, well, they all clammed up. Amethyst knew nothing, Pearl seemed to avoid the question altogether, and when Garnet was confronted by it, all she did was shout, "You can't go there," which just made Steven wonder what the heck was going on, and figure that whatever this was, it was tied to Pink Diamond, which, yeah, as I've already brought up before, the palanquin is something that the diamonds actually did go around in. As such, the more the gems tried to dissuade Stephen from looking into the palanquin, the more determined he was to look into it, and thus he decided to pretty much just go, "Screw you guys, I'll go off myself," despite Garnet pleading with him not to. As such, Stephen went to his dad, and they were able to figure out the palanquin was in Korea, and with the help of Andy, they were able to travel to Korea and discover where the palanquin was. And sure enough, it was in a mountain, and it was even gated off, similar to how the gems used to gate off the temple. But upon arriving, when they find the palanquin, it looks very different from how Stephen dreamed it, as instead of it being pink in disrepair and clearly very decrepit with flowers growing on it, it's brand new, blue, and completely fine. So it makes the pair wonder what the heck's going on until they hear someone in the distance. And so when Stephen and Greg go to investigate, they find that there's someone else there, Blue Diamond, who it turns out is actually grieving over the palanquin that Stephen saw in his dreams. And sure enough, Stephen's able to put two and two together. The dreams he was seeing were the reason he was crying, and the reason he was having these dreams is because he was seeing through Blue Diamond's eyes. As such, as Stephen begins freaking out about this, he and Greg accidentally wind up causing a commotion from their hiding spot, which prompts Blue Diamond's Pearl, who we're going to call Blue Pearl, to come over, and Greg, to try and distract them, just makes himself known and tries to make it look like that he just got lost. However, as he asks Blue Diamond what she's doing, she talks about how she lost someone and how it's interesting how the people of Earth are able to survive for so long, and yet Pink Diamond is gone, and, well, Greg is able to figure out that she's mourning the loss of someone she cared about. And so, as Greg relates to his own loss with Rose, Blue actually starts feeling somewhat of a connection with Greg, as she realizes that he's dealing with something similar, and so she's like, "Oh, you do understand what I'm going through," and so it turns out that the reason Blue is even here is because she is still under the impression that the cluster is going to wake up soon, and of course, when it wakes up, when it was supposed to wake up, it would have destroyed Earth, and the fact that Earth is still here means that it must clearly not have woken up yet. So she thinks that Earth's going to be destroyed, but considering the slight kinship that Blue Diamond has felt for Greg, she thinks that maybe, just maybe, he doesn't deserve that fate as well, before she takes Greg and brings him to her palanquin. And as Steven tries to chase after them to stop them, well, it does jack shit, as the palanquin ends up flying away into Blue Diamond's ship, which is a giant blue arm that was hidden in the clouds, and as Steven tries jumping up to the ship, it ends up warping away and leaving Steven there. Thankfully, as he falls to the ground, Garnet's there to catch him, and so the pair resolve that they're going to need to get Greg back, which is where Adventures in Light Distortion picks up, as the episode begins with Garnet and Steven warping back to the temple, which means that there was indeed a warp pad in Korea, though you could make the argument that the gems could have just blocked it off by standing on the warp pad, but whatever. Either way, once they arrive, Pearl is actually apologetic to Steven about not giving him more information, and Amethyst is just glad to see Steven okay. But pretty much the good mood is soured almost immediately as Steven lets them know that he doesn't really care, and that Blue Diamond took Greg, which causes everyone to freak out and wonder what the heck's going on. Of course, the question is raised about why she would want to take Greg at all, And so Steven starts just freaking out, and starts thinking, well, what does she want with my dad? Does she want to eat him? Does she want to put him in a zoo or something? And Pearl admits that maybe that might be the case. Which, or first Steven thinks that she wants to eat him, but Pearl's like, no, she does not want to eat him. But considering that Steven says that Blue liked Greg, Pearl thinks that if she wanted to keep him alive, then maybe she would have brought him to, well, a human zoo. Yeah, it turns out that back during the war, Pink Diamond had set up a human zoo, so to speak. And basically it's just exactly what it says on the tin. She would end up taking humans away from Earth and then just placing them in placing them in a zoo. It's basically just like an encampment, so to speak. And Pearl knows that it was real because when she served under Homeworld, she did actually witness it. And sadly, the crystal gems were never able to get to the zoo and free the humans inside. So it could still very much be in one piece, though Pearl is a little dubious since it has been 5,000 years. However, it's also the only lead that the gems have, so they decide that if Blue Diamond took Greg anywhere, she would probably bring him there. As such, the question is raised how they'll get there, and Garnet answers with the ruby's roaming eye. Yeah, they still have that after the whole incident with the rubies, and sure enough, they do end up. And sure enough, the next scene has them cut back to the barn as we see Peridot inspecting the roaming eye, and sure enough, it is up to qualifications. Though she admits that some things could be tweaked a little, such as the settings or the desktop theme, or even the gravity controls, which the rubies apparently manipulated for personal specifications. However, Steven refuses any of that, and even as he's going off, he's actually calling Connie and letting her know what they're doing, but ultimately she can't come with because they're leaving right now, they have no time to waste, and that he wants her to protect Beach City while he and the gems are gone. With the gems even charging Peridot and Lapis with similar duties, since, if they're gone, if something happens, then they won't be around to protect the city. As such, Steven and the gems get on the roaming eye and fly off into space, and while they do end up dealing with some turbulence as well as ramming into a few of the rubies that are still surrounding Earth, they do have the coordinates of the human zoo, and they're en route to get there. Although at the speed they're going, even Pearl admits that they'll probably just get there in 70 years. So Steven's not okay with that. As such, Steven insists they turn on the gravity controls, which the gems are a little dubious with, as they have no idea how it'll affect organic matter, and, well, Steven's organic matter, but Steven pretty much says screw that and just turns it on, and while shifting it on does affect Steven somewhat, or does affect Steven enough for him to black out, it's very short-lived and he gets back up relatively fine. The one it does seem to affect, though, are the gems, who now are all compact size, which even they have no idea what the heck's going on. Of course, they posit the theory that since their forms are hard light holograms, that they usually adapt and change depending on the gravity of whatever planetoid they're on. But since they're in a zero gravity setting and the gravity is being controlled by a gravity engine, they have absolutely no idea what's real. They have no idea what the heck is going on either. And at first they throw out the idea of potentially shapeshifting back, but that doesn't work either, as Amethyst displays that by shapeshifting into Puma, but even Puma's small size, which results in Amethyst calling it, hey, check it out, Puma Cub. But however, Steven is able to figure out what the heck's going on. It's the gravity engine. As Peridot said, it was customized towards Ruby settings, so with it now back on, the gems are now Ruby-sized, so to speak. So it should be a simple matter of just setting it back to normal standards, right? Well, no, because ultimately this is alien technology that Steven has absolutely no idea how to handle. And so as he continues messing with the settings, well, all he really does is just keeps changing the gems' forms. First he makes them buff like Amethyst, then he makes them small, then he makes them diamond size, which almost fills up the room, and when he tries turning on customized settings, it just causes their bodies to go to warp into weird shapes and sizes, to the point where even Amethyst, through this whole time, is just snickering, just starts getting creeped out as well. As such, as Steven continues meddling, he ends up accidentally bringing up a screen that has a big red X, and he first thinks that this will just turn everything off, but upon hitting it, it turns out that what it did, it actually disabled the gravity controls altogether, and so as a result, the settings are down, but basically, let me put it this way: when Steven turned on the gravity warp, it caused the ship to go into warp speed, and so to keep everything localized, the gravity engine inside the ship made it so that everything felt normal, so that everybody inside could just walk around, do their own thing, and just not feel the weight of everything. Steven turned that off. As a result, he now feels the full brunt of traveling through speed. Though I'm guessing, though instead of being torn apart, he's just like jettisoned into his seat, while the gems are hurled into the back of the wall, and their forms are. And because the ship is going faster than light, their forms are literally being stretched out behind the ship, with the only thing that's still connecting them to the ship being their gems, which are currently just stuck at the back of which are currently just thrown to the back of the ship. Of course, Steven doesn't understand any of this. We only learn this later. But in the meantime, Steven is now just completely alone, and because he's now just pretty much stuck to his chair, he can't actually do anything. He can barely even reach out and get to the controls, which just gets worse because the ship lets them know they're getting closer and closer to the human zoo, and if they don't slow down, they'll ram right through it. As such, Steven just starts freaking out more and more, and he tries asking for help, but of course no one's there to help him. He tries reaching for the controls, but because of the full brunt of it, it just pulls his arm back. And we also get a very bare moment as Steven just starts breaking down crying as he realizes this is all his fault. He kept pushing things so far. He was the one that pushed to go to Korea. And now because of his hastiness, they're probably all going to die and that there's no fixing this. And at this point, he just starts bawling and just saying he just wants his dad back. Which does actually manage to give Steven the determination he needs to finally reach forward and deactivate the warp, which in turn does slow the ship down enough for Steven to not be stuck to his chair, and for the gems to actually come back onto the ship, which which Steven apologizes for, but the gems say it's fine, they're fine, and even Amethyst liked it. But Steven still apologizes that this is all his fault, that he pushed it so far, but the gems remind him, no, it isn't. He's not the one that kidnapped Greg. It was Blue Diamond. But ultimately, that conversation is tabled because, well, thanks to Steven's efforts, they did manage to reach the human zoo in no time. As right outside the ship, they see it outside, which I actually admit it does kind of look it looks pretty cool. Kind of looks like an upside-down dagger. As you can see, kind of a hilt. It starts small, then expands into this weird giant stalactite, whatever, with a little ring, just kind of rotating, just kind of orbiting around it, connected only by a few shafts, so to speak. So that's where the episode ends, which brings us right into Gem Heist. Thankfully, because the gems are in the roaming eye, they're able to just go right into the docking bay of the human zoo without any issue. But there is a problem. The human zoo still is staffed, and as the gems go in, we actually see the first example of other amethysts in the show. And sure enough, Jasper was not lying. The amethysts that we see in the ship are much bigger, burly, but they're still identifiable as amethysts, as they have the same purple skin color and even have similar messed up hair to the amethysts that we know. Also, another little detail that I like, their uniforms. They actually have outfits very similar to Jasper when we first met her. But whereas Jasper's outfit was yellow tinted across it to reflect how she was a gem under the surface of Yellow Diamond, the amethysts have blue outfits, which showcases that they actually work for Blue Diamond, which, yeah, as we learn later in the episode, Blue Diamond is the one calling the shots of the human zoo. Even though Pink Diamond was the one that established the human zoo, sort of, but we'll get to that much later. Basically, after Pink Diamond was shattered, ultimately someone else had to take control of the zoo, and since Blue Diamond wanted to remember her, well, for lack of a better term, sister, so to speak, she decided to keep the zoo open and pretty much just turn it into a memorial for Pink. And as such, pretty much every gem on board, save for one, is actually a gem that used to work for Pink Diamond, which does lead to a bit of classism, but we'll get to that when we meet the appropriate character. In the meantime, though, the gems are also aware that they can't just walk right in, too. These are still homeworld gems, after all, and odds are if they just walk right in as they are, they'll be found out immediately as the crystal gems, as they are misfits. Steven's a half-human. Garnet's a fusion. Amethyst is a runt, and Pearl has no owner. They can't really just walk in and pretend. They can't just walk in and expect everything to go well. As such, Garnet thinks she has a plan, or more specifically, Sapphire has a plan, as immediately Garnet unfuses back into Ruby and Sapphire explains that if they want to get into the zoo, then they just need to play their parts, so to speak. Sapphire will pretend to be an aristocratic gem who's here to deliver a human, in this case, Steven. Ruby will be her personal guard, Pearl will be her personal Pearl, and Amethyst will take on the form of a larger Amethyst and just pretend to be Muscle. Which the gems are somewhat nervous about this and even ask if it'll work, which does lead to a somewhat funny line where Sapphire says no, and everyone's like, ugh. Yes, but even Sapphire's like, but let's do our best anyway, and let's change the future. Which leads to her just having this uneasy smile, as even his confidence is false. As such, it does seem to go well enough as they go out to the entrance to the zoo, and the amethysts there do kind of mess with them a little, as when they say they're here to drop off Steven. But ultimately they meet the one who's kind of in charge around here. Holly Blue Agate, and unlike the other gems that work here, she always served directly under Blue Diamond. And as a result, she kind of looks down on the amethysts that work here. And by looks down, I mean she treats them like shit. I'm not even kidding. The first time we see her, once she arrives and sees that Sapphire is there, she immediately just starts abusing the amethyst. Kicks one right in the shin, starts yelling at them, even says, "What did you tell them?" and all that jazz. She pretty much just has some nice bit of classism here and looks down on the amethyst because, one, they weren't directly from Blue Diamond, and two, they're from Earth. So, she's a bitch, plain and simple. And kind of a brown noser, too, because immediately she starts kissing right up to Sapphire because she thinks Sapphire is important, and immediately and every opportunity just demeans and insults all the amethysts. The only person that she seems to hold in higher regard being Blue Diamond, who, coincidentally, she talks about how Blue Diamond came by earlier with a human, and that sadly Sapphire just missed her because Blue Diamond just left. Which is somewhat a relief to the gems, but ultimately the gems still got to keep up the act, and so they stay there here to drop off Steven. And Holly Blue just kind of rolls her eyes, but is okay with it because, hey, you know what? It's activity. They got a visit from Blue Diamond and a Sapphire, one of the rarest gems that there is. So hey, good day all around. However, as Holly does order the amethyst to take Steven, Sapphire decides to try and stall for time by saying, "Hey, maybe I can get a tour of this place. You've been traveling for so long." And Holly just kind of obliges, though she tells Sapphire that the amethyst needs to stay behind and guard the door, which leaves Amethyst alone with the amethysts there. It's gonna get confusing. Either way, yeah. As they're walking, Holly does kind of give the whole basics of the zoo about how Blue Diamond took it over from Pink Diamond and turned it into a memorial, so to speak. How they upkeep it for the humans. How while they are imprisoned, they do give a general impression that the humans are open and free to do whatever they want. Just provide them with what they want. Just provide them with basic needs and so on and so forth. They're easy to control, and apparently how there's even a human disposal. I don't want to think about that. They also do have an entrance that leads directly into the zoo, but it's a one-way door. It can be opened from the outside, but on the inside it's locked shut, so none of the humans can ever escape. As such, the gems think of this as their opportunity to get into the zoo, and Sapphire and Ruby do provide a distraction with Ruby pretending that she left the gravity engine on, and Sapphire says that if they don't take care of it, it'll blow up and cause substantial damage, and so Sapphire and Holly go off to take care of it, and with Sapphire letting the gems know that they'll have 5 minutes to try and figure out how to get into the door. And unfortunately, they don't know how. Since Pearl is kind of playing the role of the subservient Pearl, she was ordered to open the doors to all the other things, and she was ordered to open the doors in the human zoo, which she does well enough, but for whatever reason, she can't open the door to the zoo itself, so they're kind of having trouble. As such, Steven and Ruby try their best to try and break into the door, try and break in themselves, but unfortunately their efforts are fruitless, and unfortunately, by the time that Holly and Sapphire get back, all they've really done is cause scorch marks on the door from Ruby running around on it. Though thankfully, Holly thinks that the amethyst did this, so, they're in the clear. However, before the tour can commence, a couple amethysts run up and want to talk to Holly, and while Holly chews them out for running and yelling, they immediately state what's going on. Blue Diamond's back! And so immediately Holly thinks that, then we gotta see her. Sapphire, you should go see her. She'll want to thank you personally for bringing a human on board, which, immediately Ruby and Sapphire start kind of freaking out, considering their own history with Blue Diamond. But by virtue of the tour now being over, Holly orders the amethyst to take Steven down to the zoo, and so sure enough, the group ends up getting separated, and while everybody's worried, they can't really do anything to stop it without alerting suspicion, so sadly Steven is taken and thrown into a chute where he is processed for the zoo as while he's going through, we see little, those little finger things that Peridot had on her limb enhancers. They're kind of in the zoo as they scan it. They scan Steven, get a picture, read his temperature, basically just get a good reading on his physical condition before they start prepping for the zoo, stripping him down to his undies, putting him in a jacket and a loincloth, and then finally just flushing him into the zoo, which, they literally flush him in. As he gets thrown into a chamber, it gets flooded, he gets strained out to the zoo and ends up in a lake, which Yeah, as Steven wonders what the heck's going on, the episode ends as he looks up and sees his dad alive and well as he's sitting down with a couple of other humans who are currently braiding his hair. So, okay, so thoughts on the episodes. First, Adventures in Light Distortion. This one is, in the grand scheme of the arc, more of a filler than anything, as it really does feel like we didn't need to see the travel from Earth to the zoo. But it does open up to some nice hijinks, so to speak, as they mess with the gravity engine. And likewise, it also does have some interesting character stuff for Steven. I mean, the plot important stuff is mostly in them realizing that the humans that they need to set up that they need to set off and go to the human zoo. As well, the human zoo is is where Greg has been captured. So of course we need to set all that up and show how they get there. It's just that the second half of the episode, which is them traveling to the zoo, that does feel unnecessary. Basically, I think what they could have done if they wanted to do all this is that they could have very easily, if they wanted to just stick with the plot stuff, they could have just had them getting to the ship and then just combined it with the Gem Heist episode. Condense what happened in the Gem Heist episode with the first half and combine it with the first half of the Adventures in Light Distortion episode, which basically would have cut time in half. But I will say this: Adventures in Light Distortion isn't bad filler. Like I said, there is some fun in seeing the hijinks and messing with the gravity engine because, well, it's just kind of amusing to see the gems get messed with, and especially what I love is that Amethyst just thinks it's all funny except for when things get wonky. Like, she likes seeing the gems all shrunken down and starts making jokes about how she thinks it should be permanent, and she just revels in seeing Pearl freaking out at how wrong things are, especially when they're growing, shrinking, and being stretched out, and so on and so forth. And I kind of love that even when they go at light speed and the central gravity is turned off and she's thrown out into space, she's like, oh man, I never knew I could stretch so far. I think I phased to a planet. I find that funny. It is amusing and typical Amethyst, and it is kind of funny to see the gems just reacting to all the wonkiness of being on board. So, I think that's funny. I like it. But in terms of character stuff, the episode really sets forth just how serious Steven is taking the journey to save his father, because, well, he feels responsible for it, and to a degree, he kind of is. After all, he was the one that pushed to want to find the Palanquin when the gems wouldn't give him any answers. He's the one that kept wanting to jump. He's the one that kept wanting to go forward and see what was happening behind the scenes, even though he was constantly told this is a bad idea. But because Steven was consistently denied the facts and not told anything about what was going on, he instead decided to take his own initiative rather than listening to people. He just kept jumping into the deep end of the pool and expecting to learn how to swim. And to be fair, I can understand why he was doing that. You can very easily understand why Steven is going through all this. Like I said when I talked about last week's episode, he keeps asking for answers that no one is willing to provide. Excuse me. Sorry, I was asked the question. But anyway, like I said, Steven was continually denied answers to his questions, and so it makes sense why he would be so determined to go to try and seek them out, even though everyone tells him not to. But with that being said, even Steven points out the flaws here. He never really stopped to think about it. After all, when you know the history of the crystal gems and the gem war with Homeworld, well, you start to see that things are a lot more complicated than everyone realizes. And yes, while the gems consistently denying Steven answers does not help him in the slightest, there are reasons for why they do that. Because, unfortunately, things are not as black and white as Steven likes to think they are sometimes. Yes, the gems are the ones that want to protect Earth, and Homeworld is the one that wants to essentially destroy the planet, but the players involved are not exactly the standard card-carrying, maniacal, mustache-twirling supervillains that you know. They are very serious threats who, if you want to try and go in and if you want to try jumping in and fighting, well, there's a very good chance that you may not like what you see. And even in the gem war, things were done that nobody was really exactly proud of. Like going back to the whole stuff with Pink Diamond. Yes, shattering her was not exactly the ideal solution, but if they wanted the Earth to be free, then she had to go, whether anybody liked it or not. Which I think, which yeah, it does. But as a result of that, but because she yeah, but because Pink Diamond was so important to so many people, of course it's going to have more lasting. It's going to have more lasting implications. Which we do kind of, which we have seen throughout the show in the form of the corrupted gems, especially in the form of the corrupted gems, so to speak. But with that being so, my point is this: you can understand why Steven is seeking out the answers he is, but at no point does he ever stop and think about why they're trying to hide this. And then again, I understand it. I understand it. The more you want answers, and the more everyone tells you no, the more you're going to want to seek them out. And I'm not going to defend the gems in that regard either, because they don't even explain why they're hiding these things. They don't actually look, there's this connect. Yes, you're right. This is connected to Pink Diamond and so forth. But something is going on. But there is something dangerous that's going on there. And if we travel there, then we'll end up getting hurt. I understand you want answers, but if we do end up going, but going there will ultimately hurt us more than it helps us. So maybe we should leave this alone for a while. Hell, maybe they could help. Maybe Garnet could have said, "Hey, Blue Diamond's there. I don't want to go near her." Which, okay, to be fair, she did say that if she told Steven why she couldn't go, it would just make him want to go more. But at the same time, Garnet's future vision is that allows her to see multiple futures. So she could have yes, that was one possibility, but there could have been another where Steven understood and was like, "Oh, okay, never mind. I'll just stay away." So I don't know. I'm not going to I'm not going to say the crystal gems are blameless in this either, but it was Steven who kept pushing it either, and so you can understand why he feels the way he does throughout the episode, and it showcases in his determination, as the gems are immediately apologetic to Steven, but he's like, "No, I don't care. You were right. I screwed up, and now my dad's taken. We need to go save him." But by that same token, that determination is what keeps him to make more stupid mistakes. He keeps wanting to he wants to head out immediately because he has no idea what's going on with his dad. He doesn't wait for Connie because, well, because they have the ship and they want to go right now. Though again, you could also go with the argument that, well, someone's got to protect Beach City, which, you know what, fair enough, that's fine too. But again, we even see that in the episode as Steven does not stop and consider any other options when the roaming eye is flying to the zoo. Which, yeah, 70 years is too long. That would not do anything well. And maybe it was a good idea to turn on the gravity engines, but because Steven was so hyper focused on trying to make the ship faster and fix everything, unfortunately, it led to things just getting worse and worse to the point where it did almost screw the gems over, which, yeah, I think that makes it even better, because I love the way the tension does kind of build up with Steven as he continues facing more obstacles in his quest to go save his dad. First, it's in the form of trying to figure out where he is. First, it's trying to get the ship working or make the ship go faster. Then it's trying to get the gems back to normal. And in his attempts to fix that, it results in them almost being killed when he turns off the central gravity altogether. And as a result, you can understand when he's faced with the inevitability that they may end up getting killed. Well, he does have he has a minor breakdown. And let me put it sorry, getting tongue-tied. We finally see the scared little boy. Like, Steven is a member of the Crystal Gems, and he does try to put on a brave face, because he knows what could happen if the gems don't do their job. People will get hurt, the planet will be destroyed, and everybody will die. But with that being said, he's still a kid thrown into a very dangerous situation and told it's your job to make sure that things like this don't happen. And we kind of start to see a bit of that veneer break here, as when Steven realizes that his actions have caused so many people he cares about to get hurt or captured or get caught in the crossfire. He breaks down as he has no idea what he's doing. He has no idea how to fix it, and he just starts crying and begging for his dad. All he wants is that's all he wants. He just wants to get his father back. He's scared, afraid, and he has no idea what he's doing. and it's just this one, and you can see that in this one bare moment. He's just afraid. He's unsure of what he's doing. He is unsure if things are going to work out. And when the realization hits that that cluelessness is ultimately going to cost them more than it would have before, it makes him start to just say, "No, I don't want this. I just want my dad back, please. I just want him back." It's heartbreaking in a sense. It allows you to finally see just kind of somewhat what all this is doing to Steven. How having to be a part of all of this is having an effect on him. We've seen that veneer crack before. We've seen it with Jasper. We've seen it with Bismuth in the episode. In the episode with Stevani when they were hallucinating the issue of Steven and Connie's issues, we saw we saw how these things affect Steven. As once Steven's vision entered the fray, once Stevani unfused back into Steven and Connie, Steven was just like emotionally paralyzed because of all the guilt hitting him. And now we see that again here in Adventures in Light Distortion as he starts realizing what he's doing, and you see the hero, the great child hero, fading away, and you just see a scared kid who's just trying desperately to hold things together. And it's sad, it's heartbreaking, and it does make you just want to give Steven a hug. It's good stuff. I like it. It's good stuff, and I like it. So on the whole, I do think that while Adventures in Light Distortion can be classified as a filler episode, it does have a lot of good emotional depth and helps set everything up. You see the tension throughout as the Gems have to figure out a plan to save Greg. I like how things progress as they make progress towards doing it. And while the second half of the episode can be boiled down to some random hijinks as they mess with the gravity engine, it does have its fair share of emotional bits with Steven to showcase just how bad things are getting to him, while also showcasing some character development as he realizes his part in all this. So again, good stuff. As for Gem Heist, this one very much is more plot focused than anything. Nothing real. We get some development in regard to the ongoing story, but on the whole, it's just mostly there for some exposition It's mostly just there for exposition and to set up the human zoo and kind of to have some tension, to kind of raise the tension with the Gems kind of being going right into the lion's den and having to pretend to be a lion themselves, which, yeah, you do showcase that, and I do like how that goes throughout the episode, because the Gems, well, they've been out of this for so long, or in the very case of Amethyst, she's never been in the middle of this, so they have to try and relearn what their status, they have to relearn their roles, so to speak. Sapphire has to pretend to be just as astute and stalwart as she was before she met Ruby. Ruby has to fall in line and bite her tongue plenty of times, especially when Holly starts talking about how immaculate Blue Diamond is, how merciful and emotional she is, and at that point Ruby is just steaming and and you can tell she just wants to punch a wall. You can see Pearl fumbling when she's asked to do basic tasks, and when people start telling her do this or do that, she starts rolling her eyes, which does lead to a funny scene where when Ruby and Steven are alone at the zoo entrance, Ruby's like, "Go, Ruby, Ruby goes, "Pearl, open the door," and Pearl's like, "Yeah, sure, that's all I'm good for," before she tries going to the door and fails to get it open. It's funny, I like it. But on top of that, but again, it still keeps everything but it keeps the tension going, as the Gems have to always stay on their toes, as they have to make sure they don't break character too much, while also unfortunately having to kind of having to sadly make some small sacrifices. Case in point, when Steven gets taken away, the Gems can't go after him to save him because it'll turn too many heads and alert everyone there that they're traitors who are here to break out one of the prisoners. So, they have to just kind of play the role. They have to, as a consequence of having to play by the rules, so to speak, things don't exist. They unfortunately have to deal with that. They unfortunately have to turn a blind eye, which they don't like doing, but it's necessary to have to do the mission. Though it kind of does lead to some kind of progress being made, as Steven does manage to find his dad, so, one step forward, 2 steps back, I guess. I don't know. So again, it mostly just keeps everything going while also having some nice character bits, which also does lead to a line which gets echoed later, because you can see Holly showcasing more of that classic Gem classism / racism, as she really is not, as as she only treats Pearl like a servant, and even after Pearl opens the door, she goes, "That'll be all." And Pearl just, again, has to bite her tongue, which, if I can talk about another thing, I do like how we can see a small little window into more of the gem hierarchy at play. Because, well, this is because we see more, because this is one of the times that we're essentially in homeworld territory. We're not on homeworld directly, but we can see a bit of how the society of the gem homeworld works in the zoo. We see that showcased with the amethysts, with Holly, and how she treats both the amethyst and the crystal gems. Because, well, Holly in that regard is a high-ranking gem. She's not like the highest ranking, but she's still pretty up there. And we see how and we see that classism come into place with how she treats everybody, especially case in point, she never directly talks to Pearl, usually just speaking through Amethyst. And the only time she ever directly talks to her when she said, "Oh yeah, you did a good job," so you can that's a nice little thing there. But we also kind of see more of how. But we also see more of just how high and mighty she truly thinks she is, especially with how she treats the amethysts. In her mind, they are very much just disposable. The only reason she tolerates them is because her diamond tolerates them. If she had her way, she'd probably just chuck them into space. And you see that reflected throughout the episode, as every little thing the amethysts do, she has something negative to say about it. When she comes back, after Steven, Ruby, and Pearl fail to open the door, she immediately thinks the scorch marks Ruby left on it were the result of an amethyst, which I kind of find hilarious because just like, how? How would an amethyst have done it? What, were they just smoke? What, did one amethyst decide, those humans deserve some barbecue and just started branding the door? What the hell? It's stupid. I don't know. I don't know why. I find that amusingly stupid, so I like that somewhat. But what I think again, you see that more, but again, you also see it a good but again, you also see that Holly's kind of one of those people who somewhat indirectly benefits from this. And, well, if we want to talk about characters, well, the Crewniverse did a very good job at making Holly Blue Agate exceedingly punchable. She's rude to everybody, she's very much classist, and, well, she's an embodiment of the phrase, if you want to study someone's true character, see how they treat the help. Because literally anyone that she believes as below her, she talks down to, she demeans, she yells at, and just treats like utter garbage, and yet anyone that she sees as high above her, she just starts brown-nosing them to hell and back. We see that when she talks to Sapphire, she immediately talks about how she refers to her as your eminence, or starts treating everything that Sapphire does as the be-all, end-all. Case in point, at one point, Steven asks about the zoo, and Holly just pretends that he didn't say anything, but then when Sapphire asks the same question, she's like, "Oh, that's a very excellent question." Like, yeah, she is clearly just a kiss-ass in the highest regard, who thinks that as long as she has the attention of someone higher up, she's in good graces. She can do whatever she wants, and that if you're below her, you are very much it's fair game to treat you like shit. Because, well, you're below her, so that means that you don't matter. She matters. She's Holly Blue Agate. She is the one that runs the station. You're just the hired help. Now get to it before I have to look at you too long. That's her mindset. That's what she does. That's how she treats everybody. And we also kind of see, and in some kind of way, we see how that reflects towards not just the gems below her, but also to the humans as a whole. I suppose I should talk about this. We also see how gems view organic life. Put simply, they treat them like animals despite their sentience. We see that kind of reflected with not just Holly, but also the amethysts. While the amethysts treat Steven somewhat better than Holly did, because they at the very least do somewhat talk to him and even kind of get a kick out of messing with him. Going back to when the crystal gems arrive to the docking bay, they say, "Oh, bad news! The human zoo's closed. We're just gonna have to toss this guy into space." And then when Steven freaks out, they just kind of get a kick out of seeing his reaction. Like, again, you kind of get a sense. They do direct him more, and when they even throw Steven into the hull, they say, "Well, in you go," which, yeah, these are minor things, but it's at least more than what Holly gave. But even they and Holly just treat Steven like an animal. They never directly talk to him. They treat him as if they treat him as if he's an animal who's just struggling. And even in the case of Holly, as Steven is talking, she just pretends that he's just making noise. It's like when you try to rope a cow and the cow is mooing. You just like, "Oh, why is it making all that noise? Shut up." Shut up. Even though he's clearly speaking English, which we know the gems can speak. And before you say, well, universal translator, well then how, well, which may be the case. Maybe the gems do speak another language, and just from our human perception, it sounds like English. But by that same token, that means that they should understand Steven. So it's clear that Holly is just ignoring him because, well, he's just a human. He's just an animal. He's just someone from Earth. He can be culled. He can be cattle. He can be cold. He can be treated like garbage. We can do whatever we want with him, and so on and so forth. So she just blatantly ignores him and treats him as lesser just because he's human. Which, again, showcases some good old-fashioned racism right there. So again, it gives us more of a window into how the gem hierarchy operates, and does give us a nice little tidbit of how they see humans, which I guess you can probably guess anyway because they have a human zoo. So what do I know? I know. But, so, yeah, again, it helps give, like I said, the episode does give some good exposition towards the greater plot line with how the zoo operates and how the zoo operates, some more lore and how it works and so on and so forth. So I will give it that. And it does have some nice suitable tension as the gems have to try and survive this place and try and find Greg. But I also like that it does add some more lore to everything, which I guess another aspect I like. Since we finally get to see Amethyst out in the wild, we also get a sense that our Amethyst, well, she is a lot more like them than we know. Because while the Amethysts don't really get a lot of room to be as zany as the Amethyst that we know, you do get some slight hints towards their personalities. They act a bit more they act whiny when Holly chooses them out. It's like, oh, come on, we didn't do anything. When they get a kick out of seeing Steven squirm when they make him think they're going to throw him into space. And then likewise, when they rush to tell Holly Blue Agate that Blue Diamond's back, it's not very orderly like you would see a lot of other gems do. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry for interrupting, Holly, but Blue Diamond's on her way. Like it's just like a courier boy. They don't really know. They're not doing it. They don't feel like soldiers. They're just they're just workers, and they're just trying to do the best. They're just trying to do the best they're trying to make the best of the situation they're in. So Again, another nice little window into how things operate. Otherwise, though, it really just feels like the episode just feels like a stepping stone. Not bad, does give enough tension, does make you want to see where things are heading now, especially with the development of Steven being brought away from the group and being sent to the zoo. So, yeah, on the whole, it's a fine episode. So, yeah, that's about it. Adventures in Light Distortion, good episode. Does feel more like filler, but has some great character stuff. And Gem Heist, I think, is a nice episode that helps give some more lore, showcase a nice little window into how Gem Society operates and the hierarchy within it, and so on and so forth. While also making you want to see where things go, especially with the episode ending with Steven being sent to the zoo. So on the whole, still a good pair of episodes. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next Friday as we see the conclusion of this arc and see just how successful the gems are in saving Greg. So until then, hope you have a good day and take care.